Hello. In today's video, I'm going to be going over a process that folks go through as they near end of life, referred to as terminal agitation. It's sometimes called terminal restlessness or terminal delirium. I'll be talking about why it happens, when it happens, what it looks like, and then ways to effectively try to manage it. I'm Nancy Lee. I'm a nurse practitioner certified in hospice and palliative care, and I have spent the last 25 years of my life working with patients who are at or near end of life. So let's get started. I know this board, you cannot see it. So I'm going to be reading from it and using it to guide this discussion. And just know that I have made a copy in the description box that can be downloaded and printed out. That's a really good guide and contains all of this information. Excuse me. In any event, let's get started. Terminal agitation or terminal restlessness or delirium. When does it occur? Normally it occurs in the last days or week to 2 weeks of life. Really, my experience has been more around a week. Some of the literature will say that it is 1 to 3 days before death. I think people go through it sooner than that. It's normally around a week or 10 days. Once they get through the terminal agitation, that normally they transition to what we call actively dying, which is the very last phases of life. Why does it occur? Well, it's multifactorial. There's metabolic changes going on as the body begins to shut down and the organs fail. It produces toxins that accumulate in the blood, and it affects the brain and the level of consciousness and mentation, and causes confusion and can lead to more agitation. Electrolyte imbalances. Oxygen levels begin to lower, and carbon dioxide begins to increase. That contributes to this. It can be medication side effects. The patient can have urinary retention or fecal impaction. Sometimes at end of life, people's bladders are just unable to empty them. So that needs to be assessed, as well as their bowel situation, and that needs to be addressed as well. Or uncontrolled pain. So when people are at this stage of end of life, they can't really articulate that they're in pain. They'll act it out by being really restless. So it can be uncontrolled pain. Now, to me, in my experience working with thousands of people, this last reason right here is what I think is the biggest contributor, and that's existential, spiritual, or psychological distress. A lot of times during this phase, people will be acting out their life story or parts of their life story. They can include a lot of hallucinations about, spiritual things. They do begin to see deceased loved ones. So it just seems to me that it's more of an existential kind of spiritual phenomena that happens. But yes, there are metabolic changes that science would explain why this is going on. Now, what does it look like? Well, first of all, it can be severe to mild. Normally, people, in my experience, are somewhere right in the middle. I have seen some very severe cases. I'll talk more about that when I talk about medication management towards the end of the video. All right, people become agitated with sudden confusion, fluctuating with lucidity. They might have brief moments of lucidity. They have repetitive movement. You'll see them picking at their clothes or picking at the sheets, or they may fold a towel or a blanket over and over again, and they just keep doing the same thing. There's a lot of picking going on. They'll reach in the air. I have had people who are able to communicate or say things about there being lights that they're reaching for. I had one gentleman talk about reaching for the hand of God. He couldn't reach it quite yet. People have described angelic kind of beings that they're trying to reach for. Excuse me. They will see people who aren't there. Like they may say, who's that guy over in the corner? And there's nobody in the corner. A common phenomena that I have seen over the years is they'll ask me, who are all these children in here? It is so bizarre to me that is a common thing. People say, where did all these kids come from? And there's no kids in the room. Okay, they may try to get up, and despite their weakness, they just think they gotta go. They start getting into, I think I just need to go. We gotta pack, we gotta get in the car, we gotta go. If they stand up, they will fall down. At this point when they're this close to end of life, they're profoundly weak. They cannot hold up their own weight and they will fall down. So that's where medication management really is important, because we want to try to keep them safe. They may start taking off all their clothes. I have had some patients that just want to be naked. You can take a gown or a blanket and just throw it on them out of dignity, to try to keep them covered. They'll take it off and you can just put it, so this goes back and forth. Hopefully the medication when we get to the medication management, we can, some of that gets relieved. Now, they may call on a deceased parent, and that's common, especially the mother. It's been my experience over the years, if somebody starts calling for their mother, they've got about 3 days to live. It's been my experience. They can present with some fear and anxiety, and really determined to go, like very determined. It can be very difficult to keep someone from getting up and getting out because they've got to go. The fear and anxiety normally is just mixed in with all of this like waxing and waning of some fearfulness and anxiety. I think they just don't know what's going on. I want to say too that terminal agitation is very common. Up to like 90% of people experience some form of terminal restlessness. The literature will tell you 50 to 90%, but I've worked again with thousands of people, and I don't recall ever working with somebody that didn't have some form of terminal agitation. So now I'm going to flip the board and talk about the management of this. There we go. Again, I'll have a handout you can download that has all this information on it. I don't expect you to be able to read this board. Okay, so how are we going to manage it? First, we're going to rule out any reversible causes like pain, urinary retention, constipation, medications that are contributing. Some medications can contribute. The healthcare providers that are overseeing the patient know how to assess for these things. Urinary retention, common at end of life, and nurse can pass a catheter and relieve the bladder distension. Now, this is very important. In order to keep this person managed and safe, and you can think of agitation and restlessness as a form of pain. Anybody that's that agitated is not comfortable. So think about it as a form of pain. We want to relieve this distress because it's a form of discomfort. Medicate around the clock. for likely 3 to 5 days, scheduled medicines. We use a combination of medications, pain medicine, benzodiazepine, like Ativan. Now, I want to say something about Ativan. In the elderly, many elderly, I found out like 50% of them, I don't like using Ativan in the elderly because they have the opposite reaction. So you want to start with a very small dose, and if they do okay, then adjust it, titrate it upward to their symptomology. But most importantly are the antipsychotics that are used. Haloperidol, olanzapine, or Zyprexa is another term for that. I'm not going to start rattling off all the antipsychotics, but there are several of them. These medicines are used in combination. They should be scheduled around the clock to keep the person calm and safe. If you do not put this on a schedule because you think they're calm, and when that medicine wears off, we start all over again, starts all over again. And it can be very distressing for the patient and for the people caring for the patient. Environment is the next thing and the last thing I want to talk about. Limit visitors to no more than 2 people in the room. I have walked in rooms where somebody is terminally agitated and there's like a crowd of people there, like 10, 15 people, and I have to say, okay, everybody, let's come outside and have a little talk. The patient picks up on the energy from the people in the room. When there's that many people in the room, there's sort of a frenetic, energy just from all of those people. And then with the patient being agitated, the people witnessing it are getting anxious. So it's just a bad combination. You never want to have more than 2 people in the room. Soft lighting and soft music if the person, normally soft music is soothing. Calm voices, no matter what the person says or does, calm voices. Now remember, this person's going to be hallucinating, confused. Don't ever argue with them. Meet them where they are. Don't try to bring them back to reality. Just go along with them. And they may, a lot of times, if they're doing some parts of their life review, they'll think they're at work and they haven't worked in 40 or 50 years. But they'll talk about being at work or talk about somebody that's at work with them. So you just go along with them. Familiar touch if appropriate. Many times when people are terminally agitated, they do not want to be touched. So soothing touch if it seems to be effective, and it should be done by somebody who's familiar to the patient. Spiritual support, prayer. If the person was very religious, reading the Bible, praying aloud can be very soothing and calming to the person during this stage. So just remember, no arguing, meet the patient where they are, and remember this, people die the way they lived. If somebody in life was a very go-getter, strong-headed, boss of their own show, very opinionated, those people seem to have a much more difficult time during this stage. If they were meek and mild-mannered, it's been my experience that their agitation is not as severe, it's just not. I hope this video was useful, and I, again, have put in the description box a printout of all of this information for you to print out for free, and it can be very useful if you're going through this or know somebody who's going through this. And if you would, comment, like, subscribe. I hate to say all that, but I'm trying to grow this channel. And, or discuss, if you've had similar experiences with terminal agitation, I'd love to hear about it and how it went. I am going to leave my personal email also in the description box. You're welcome to email me and we can discuss your personal situation one-on-one. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.